Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right. Hello again, everybody. Hello and welcome back to the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler on. Pleasure to be back with you as always, and excited to dive into today's conversation. This is an important one, I think. What I want to address today is myth busting some of the most pervasive limiting beliefs and assumptions that are out there in the relationship world, and specifically around attachment theory, and not even just the theory itself, but how the theory has been internalized by the popular culture. And it's just largely incorrect. It's largely misinformed. And I think it's really seductive. It's really a trap because we all love to have an identity, right? And when we find something, when we find a system that names our experience and gives us a definition for who we are and why we are that way, and maybe even more seductively, a definition for who other people are, especially the people who hurt us, and why they are that way, it becomes really seductive to buy into it like it's the truth, like it's a fact. And what I want to start by saying today is attachment theory is not the truth. It's not a fact. It is a way of labeling certain patterns. And I'll say it's a very superficial way of labeling certain patterns. And that doesn't mean it's all bad. It doesn't mean it's all wrong. And today I'm going to talk into some of the things that attachment theory has gotten right and some of the ways in which it is helpful. But the way that it's been used in the popular culture, and most people who are talking about attachment theory don't really even understand attachment theory. They haven't read the work of Bowlby and Ainsworth, who were the originators of the theory, and really understood the experiments that were done and the context in which this theory was developed and the ways in which it's relevant and which it's not. But it's become a pop psychology thing on social media that people are putting these labels out there. And what's happening is these labels describe pain that we have. And it gives us a definition for why we are the way we are and why the people who piss us off are the way they are. And we throw these labels around, and I'm just going to say this, and if this offends somebody, then maybe there's something to look at there. But it has largely become something that is used by anxious women to weaponize their resentment against avoidant men. And something I'm going to look at today is how even anxious women or anxious people are not always as anxious as they seem to be, even though I understand the experience is anxiety. And avoidant men or avoidant people are not always as avoidant as they seem to be, even though on the surface it looks like they avoid. But there are deeper layers to this, and this is what attachment theory doesn't really address, especially the pop psychology version of it that we're getting on social media. And what's happening is it's mostly used by anxious people, and they feel anxiety in relationship, and they say, oh, I'm anxious because I feel anxiety. And then they look at the person who ghosted them, or the person who withdrew from the relationship, or the person who didn't want the exact same thing they wanted on the exact same timeline they wanted it, and they say, oh, they're avoidant because they avoided the relationship that I was trying to have. And I'm anxious because their avoidance made me anxious. And this is who I am and this is who they are. And it's just a really superficial, narrow label that we put on really complex human experiences. And honestly, I'm going to call it what it is. It's fucking toxic. Identifying ourselves and others through our attachment style is not healthy and it's not helpful. It's fucking toxic. And one of the most toxic things I see, and this is for all the anxious ladies out there, and I send you a lot of love and compassion, I get it. I've identified with anxious attachment at periods in my life. I know what it feels like to wait by the phone and hope that a message comes through, or to send a message and be pacing like with short breath, waiting for their response, right? Like I know what it feels like. So I get the pain behind it, and I'm compassionate to the pain behind it. But one of the most toxic things I see is anxious women criticizing and harshly judging avoidant men because this man didn't want the same relationship she wanted in the same way she wanted it at the same time she wanted it. And now he's an immature, emotionally stunted asshole. And she's the good one, the loving one who wanted love, and he just didn't want it. And there's something so toxic about this because it's actually undermining his right to choose, right? Like, where in this whole framework is his right to say, I want this relationship or I don't want it? At what point did somebody not wanting exactly what you wanted in the same way you wanted at the same time you want it equal an asshole, equal being emotionally stunted? And I understand there are cases where that's true. There are cases where he is an asshole. There are cases where he is emotionally stunted. But the way this conversation has developed in the popular culture is completely devoid of compassion, completely devoid of depth of awareness and understanding of what's happening with other people and also what's happening with us. And so what I've been working on lately, and I'm really excited, I'm going to share this with you today, is I have developed a blueprint system that allows us to understand our relational blueprint. And it fills in the gaps where attachment theory fails. So this isn't broad labels of anxious and avoidant, but these are detailed archetypes based on subjective experience rooted in a specific kind of wounding and a specific adaptation to that wounding and how that has played out in our relationships. And what is maybe most important about this is that for each blueprint, I've also written out a specific path to healing that wound, right? So each blueprint is rooted in a core wound. And for each of these blueprints, I've written out a path to healing that wound. And so what I want to do in today's episode is I want to name some of the ways that attachment theory has really served us, because it has. And I don't want to make it sound like it's all bad. But then I also want to name the pitfalls, the places where attachment theory is hurting us now, where it's become misunderstood in the culture to an extent where it's actually becoming toxic to use attachment theory. Attachment theory is becoming a weapon that gives certain people moral superiority and other people harsh criticism and judgment. And that's not fair. That's not healthy. And then what I want to do is tell you a little bit about this system that I've developed that is going to be a lot more comprehensive than attachment theory. And what it's going to do is it's going to really help you to understand your patterns and also maybe understand other people's patterns. But it's going to help you to understand your patterns and give you a clear path to what's really needed to heal those patterns so that you can create the kind of depth of love that you really want to have. So let me start by just speaking into what attachment theory has done well. And I think there was a time when it was really, really helpful to be able to acknowledge that some people have an anxious style and some people have an avoidant style. And this was maybe, I don't know, 5-10 years ago when it started to become popular on social media, and it was moving from something that psychologists studied in school to something that was becoming common knowledge in the culture. And I think there was a period of time where it was really helpful, because what it did was it gave us language to an experience that before that had been undefined. Right? So it gave us language when somebody was constantly experiencing relational anxiety, and they would feel the pressure and the distance and the waiting and the pushing and not knowing, should I say something? Should I not say something? And there was a whole world of people who were experiencing this. And when they understood, oh, I have anxious attachment, that was helpful for them. It gave language to something that had otherwise been undefined. Before, people thought there's just something wrong with me, and now they realize, no, there's a whole school of people that feel the same way I do about this. And for people who actually educated themselves in attachment theory and learned about the work of Bowlby and Ainsworth and the core philosophy from which it came, it went beyond just giving them a label, but it also gave them an origin story, a reason why they have this label, why they relate the way they do. It also helped us to understand people on the other side of the spectrum. So if someone was avoiding or withdrawing from a relationship, well, that person also had an origin story. And it helped us to understand, okay, what was that person's origin and why do they avoid relationships in the way they do? And this was all rooted in a sense of compassion, a sense of understanding, a depth of awareness. Today, most of that is gone. Most of the depth that is really underlying attachment theory, people don't really understand where it comes from and why it is the way it is. It's been reduced to anxious people are the good ones who want love, and they're always nervous because they're trying to get it, and they're dealing with all these avoidant motherfuckers who are just not receptive and not emotionally intelligent, and they're withdrawing from all the love that somebody tries to get them. And it's become a place where anxious people take a stance of moral superiority. And avoidant people are the bad guys, the villains. And one, that's not what attachment theory was about. And two, it's just not healthy and it's not helpful. Right? If any time a system is feeding your own sense of ego superiority and causing you to place yourself morally above others as the good one, the righteous one, and to make somebody else the enemy or the bad one, like that should be a big red flag right there that it's not a healthy system or it's not a helpful system. And again, I want to say this isn't inherently what attachment theory is about, but this has become what it's about in the culture. So let me start by saying that anxious people are not the good ones and avoidant people are not the bad ones. What we have are two wounds. One wound causes people to cling. The other wound causes people to hesitate. Both of these have origin stories. And if you dive into the research on attachment theory, you can find the origin stories for why anxious people are the way they are. What was the wounding of experiencing inconsistent love and an unstable environment in childhood that led them to develop anxiety around intimacy? And what was the origin story for an avoidant person in terms of the love that they didn't receive or the fact that love wasn't safe to them? And so they developed an avoidant style. And this is very pervasive. Women are largely anxiously oriented because of the way that we raise girls in the culture, and men are largely avoidantly oriented because of the way that we raise boys in our culture. Now, of course, I always feel like it's important to mention this. There are exceptions on both sides. There are avoidant women, there are anxious men. So attachment theory has done a good job of giving us large, broad frameworks for which we can understand these different styles of relating, and a general understanding, if you dive deep enough into it, of why we are the way we are, although most people don't go that far with it. But attachment theory has also failed in a lot of ways. And look, I want to say this. At the time, it was a progressive theory, right? But I mean, this started in like the 50s or something. correct me if I'm wrong. Some of you might know more than I do about this, but I did the research myself a while back, and I think it was like in the 1950s that attachment theory was originally developed. It could have been earlier, could have been a little later, so don't quote me on that. But it was a long time ago, right? Like it's outdated. It's not relevant for where we are today and the level of emotional intelligence that we have today. So it was a great starting point. It was a great opening. It gave us a great framework, but it's a really, really old system. It was cutting edge for its time, but it's not cutting edge anymore. And I want to talk about some of the places where it has failed. Because the reality is that people are not anxious or avoidant. So what attachment theory has done is it has given broad labels. If you're anxious or if you're avoidant, it has given broad labels to patterns that are actually complex. And I want to say this. Underneath every anxious woman is somebody who is secretly avoiding love by pushing, controlling, manipulating, performing, pleasing, rather than actually regulating her nervous system in a way where she can truly be ready to receive love. Attachment theory doesn't address that. Attachment theory doesn't address that anxious people are avoidant people in disguise. And let me put it like this too. Avoidant people are not just avoidant people. Underneath every avoidant man is a man who deeply wants to love and be loved, but is so terrified of intimacy and experiences so much anxiety when he becomes intimate with someone that he has to withdraw to protect himself. And so attachment theory doesn't address that avoidant people are actually anxious people in disguise. And I've worked with thousands of clients on this, and what I've seen time and time again is that when anxious people become intimate with someone, they start becoming avoidant. An anxious person feels safe chasing love, but chasing is not the same thing as having. Chasing is not the same thing as being in love. And so an anxious person takes on this persona of, I want love, I want love, I want love, I want love, I want love. But when she actually gets it, or when they actually get it, if it's not a woman, I'm using the common stereotype there. But when they actually get it, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I don't know if you're the right person. Or like, I mean, we have the most common stereotypical trope of the woman who chases the bad boy, the emotionally unavailable man, the avoidant one. But the moment a secure man who's like, hey, I want you, I want to be with you shows up, she says, I'm not attracted to you, or I like you as a friend. And I know some of you might criticize that I'm using very stereotypical tropes here, but let me say, these are stereotypical tropes for a reason, right? It's not an accident that we have these stereotypes. We have these stereotypes because they are observed patterns that occur among masses and masses of people. That's how they become stereotypes. And I understand not every individual is going to fit into that perfectly. But it's a stereotype for a reason. It's a stereotype because it's common and we see it happen over and over and over and over again. And that's a perfect example of someone who believes that she wants love, is chasing love, is pursuing love, is trying to earn love and prove herself worthy of love. But the moment a man shows up and says, hey, I love you, I want to be with you, I'm going to show up, I'm going to be consistent, I'm going to do everything. And she says, I like you as a friend. Or she says, I don't know how I feel about that. And she kind of keeps him on the side and then ends up dropping him for some avoidant man or some bad boy type. And that whole pattern is avoidance. She feels safe in the chase, but when real love, when real commitment shows up, she resists it. And then she lives in this fantasy that says, oh, well, if I find the bad boy who's avoidant with most women, but he chooses me, that's what I'm looking for. It's like the Beauty and the Beast fantasy. I want to find the beast and turn him into a prince. Again, we have our fairy tales for a reason. Why? Because they're metaphors for patterns that we see play out. I want to find the beast and turn him into a prince. But beasts don't turn into princes. Beasts are beasts. Princes are princes. Kings are kings. So these are the traps that attachment theory doesn't address. And let's talk about the avoidance side of it. Let's talk about the man who indulges in casual encounters. He likes to date. He likes to sit on the dating app and chat with women endlessly, but he doesn't want things to get real. Right? It's comfortable for him to get feminine attention through a conversation on a dating app, but the moment she says, "Are you going to take me on a date or what?" he freezes. Why does he freeze? Well, now it's getting real. And now he has to deal with his discomfort with being available to somebody. That's anxiety. That's not avoidance. I mean, it is avoidance, but he's avoiding his own feelings of anxiety. He's avoiding the reality that he deeply wants to connect with a woman. He deeply wants to love and be loved, and he wants to be good enough, and he wants to be accepted, and he wants her approval and her adoration, and he wants to be her king. And while he's chatting with her on the app, he can get a little hint of that experience. Right? He can feel like he's her king. But when he has to show up in person, what if she doesn't find him attractive enough? What if she compares him to the guy she went out with last week? What if he's genuinely a nice guy and he's going to show up and be kind and compassionate and considerate, but she's going to want a bad boy instead? And so he avoids. But he's not avoiding because he's some unsympathetic asshole. He's avoiding because he's afraid of his own anxiety. He's afraid of what it's going to feel like to put himself out there and not be good enough for her. Let's take the man who has casual sexual encounters with women and then ghosts them afterwards. Or maybe he doesn't ghost, maybe he just distances himself. So maybe they sleep together a few times, they go on a few dates, but then as the relationship progresses, he just distances more and more and more. And then eventually says, "I'm just not feeling it." It's the same thing. And maybe this man has a little more bravado, he has a little more confidence, he has a little more security. And maybe that's because he's gotten more attention from women throughout his life. Maybe it's because he's good in bed and he knows he's good in bed. Maybe it's because he's got that seduction skill. But it's the same thing, because the deeper he gets into relationship with a woman, the more likely it is that she's going to expose his inadequacies. When he's hopping from woman to woman, from bed to bed, from sexual encounter to sexual encounter, he can be the king. But the moment he has to stay with one woman and reveal himself more and more and more and more and more, the more he lets himself get attached to her, the more he risks the possibility of losing her. The more she shines a light on his inadequacies, the more he reveals himself to her, the greater the possibility that she might say, "You know what? I actually don't want you." So his avoidance, yes, it's avoidance, but it's not really avoidance. It's anxiety in disguise. Just like her anxiousness is avoidance in disguise. And this is what attachment theory doesn't really offer us. Attachment theory doesn't offer the nuanced complexity of the fact that people are not one thing. Now, some of you might say, "Well, Shane, what you're describing is disorganized attachment. People who vacillate from anxious to avoidant." And let's talk about that for a moment, because this is a big place where attachment theory fails. It says, if you don't fit neatly into the category of anxious or avoidant, then you're disorganized. And the way that's internalized by most people is, okay, my dysfunction is so complex that I can't even be categorized. And good luck having a healthy relationship with that, right? Like, I mean, how does it feel to be told that? You're just all over the board. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's a result of intense trauma that you experienced as a child. And good luck with that, right? Like, I mean, that's not hopeful or helpful. And so what happens in the attachment theory system is that most people who have a sense of depth that recognize, well, I'm not really one thing. I kind of go back and forth between things, which these are really some of the most insightful people. People who, rather than aligning behind one label that just puts a blanket statement on top of their pain, they actually have enough self-awareness to go, no, I feel different things. And sometimes I lean in, sometimes I lean out. I want certain people, but I don't want other people, right? Like, these are the people that are actually quite self-aware, and they're the ones who get lumped into a disorganized category. These people are supposedly the most traumatized, when in reality, they're probably the most healed. This is a big place where attachment theory fails us. And so what I would suggest is that all people are somewhat disorganized. Now, I think there's something worth stating, and I believe the intention when the original experiments and studies on attachment theory were done, the intention was to name that there are some people who have severe trauma around relationships, maybe as a result of severe abuse. The general theory behind disorganized attachment is that it was when your caretaker, or when the person that you looked to for safety as a child, was the same person causing you harm. And it creates this really complex system of, I don't know if I can reach out to them for love, or I don't know if they're going to hurt me. And that's generally the theory behind disorganized attachment. And there are extreme cases of people who were subjected to horrible abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. They were beat, or they were raped, or things like this, that it's more than just tending to be anxious or avoidant, but they actually have really, really strong fight, flight, or freeze responses that are characterized of typically what we call disorganized attachment. But in reality, we're all somewhat disorganized. We all vacillate between feelings of anxiousness and avoidance. They're two sides of the same coin. We all want love, and we're all afraid of it. And some of us have wounds that cause us to cling to love and for reassurance. And some of us have wounds that cause us to push love away. It's really the same wound playing out in different forms. And I'm not saying the exact same things happen to both people, but it's the same complexity playing out in different forms. This is the nuance that we don't get from attachment theory. And this is why your attachment style is a lie. Because if you turned on this podcast today and you thought you were anxiously attached, well, I'm pointing out that you got some avoidance going on too. If you turned on this podcast today and you thought you were avoidant, well, I'm pointing out that you got some anxiousness going on too. And the human experience is a big, complex mess of conflicting emotions and feelings and survival responses and somatic experiences in the body that cannot be condensed into a certain label. That's just not the way being human works. That's not the reality of being human. Again, I'm not criticizing attachment theory as a system. I think largely it has been very helpful to have these names, to observe these patterns in people, to understand that if you do tend to feel anxious or if you do tend to be avoidant, that doesn't mean you're broken. That doesn't mean that something's wrong with you. That is a natural survival response that many, many people have just like you. That awareness alone was deeply healing and helpful and needed. But there are some important things missing. One of the things I think attachment theory doesn't really address that is super, super important to address is, what do you do if you have one of these patterns? Right? What do you do? And some coaches have talked about this, so it's not completely unheard of, but it is something that's not commonly addressed in the culture. People identify with being anxious or avoidant or disorganized. And then it's like, okay, well, what do I do with that? There's not a map, there's not a path to heal that, to bring that into balance. And really, the core of attachment theory is that we all want to become more secure. We all want to become more secure, right? Like that's the basic philosophy. And so you could think about it like this. If you imagine a spectrum with an extreme on one end that's called anxious and extreme on the other end that's called avoidant. And then in the center point, you have the balance point, which is called secure. And basically what we want to do is we want to bring our patterns into balance. And what's happening for pretty much everybody, unless you're deeply secure, unless you've really brought these patterns into balance, it's not that we are living on one end of the spectrum or the other. It's that we are bouncing between equal sides of the spectrum. Right? So let's just say, for illustration purposes, that you're 50% of the way out on the anxious side or the avoidant side. Well, what's going to happen generally is, based on context, based on situation, you're going to bounce between the 50% point on the anxious spectrum and the 50% point on the avoidance spectrum. Let's say you're 100% out. This might be the people who have real serious relational trauma and are having deep, reactive, somatic experiences of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. They're way out on the edges of the spectrum. And this is what attachment theory would typically categorize as real disorganized attachment, where somebody is vacillating not just from one side of the spectrum to the other, but from the extreme ends of the spectrum. So I go from desperately chasing and pursuing and proving to complete withdrawal, complete freeze, complete shutdown. And in any given relationship, I might vacillate between these extremes pretty easily. But we're all doing that in subtle ways. You know, the anxious person, what they often do is hide behind their efforts to prove themselves. And something really interesting I've observed for a long time, that anxious people are actually often the least authentic. Avoidant people are generally more authentic. Isn't that interesting? Now, some avoidant people just don't communicate at all, right? Some avoidant people just avoid any kind of discomfort, shutdown, and withdrawal. So I'm not saying that all avoidant people are deeply authentic, but avoidant people will usually be honest about how they feel. I don't know how I'm feeling. I don't know if I want this. They're generally a little more honest about what they feel. Anxious people are not honest about what they feel. They try to play all kinds of games. They try to play it cool and pretend that they don't want it as much as they do, but then they drop hints or play little games or do little manipulative maneuvers to try to draw the person in. Right? So it's interesting how an avoidant person will usually be more honest than an anxious person. And lack of honesty is its own form of avoidance. But here's the thing. The anxious person deeply fears that they're not good enough. The anxious person fears that they're just not lovable, they're not worthy, they're not good enough. That's part of their core wound. And so what they do is they try to be a perfect version of themselves. And they think, if I show up for this person perfectly, if I text at the right times, if I call at the right times, if I step back at the right times, if I let the relationship breathe at the right times, if I give them space, if I lean in, if I'm pleasant, if I'm agreeable, if I do what they want me to do, all these things, if I be the perfect version of myself, but never am really real about what I'm really feeling, I can earn love by being good enough, even though I doubt that I am actually good enough. And so, in a very interesting way, the anxious person is hiding their authenticity behind their efforts to earn love. And the paradox here is that they're trying so hard to earn something that they can never actually have unless they become authentic. So their whole strategy, their whole approach is actually a way of avoiding love. Now, the avoidant person avoids it more overtly, more directly, more obviously. But what they're really doing is they're protecting themselves from painful feelings, from uncomfortable feelings. And the avoidant person usually feels deep down that they are not equipped for a relationship. You see, we tend to paint it, and I know I mentioned this already, but I just want to come back to it. We tend to paint it like the anxious person is the good one, the loving one, the open-hearted one, the one who wants love and is ready for it. And the avoidant person is just the jerk who doesn't want, but that's not the way it is. You see, the avoidant person has deep fears of their own inadequacy. They feel that they're not equipped for love, that maybe they're just not built in relationship the way other people are, that they don't want it the same way other people do, and they don't really know why, and they often feel confused about it. And they're like, I want to be in relationship, but when I get close, my nervous system just freaks out, and it feels so unsafe for me, and I just need to gain my space back. They carry the deep wound of resisting the thing that on some level they want the most. And I've coached a lot of avoidant people, both men and women, and I want to tell you, like, it's painful. It's painful. It's lonely. And it's harder to heal because there's not a lot of help for avoidant people. And that's important to name too. Like, most of the relationship coaches out there are creating support for anxious people because anxious people are the ones who are asking for support. And I'll even name that, to a degree, I'm guilty of this, and it's not because I do it on purpose, but it's because anxious people are constantly demanding help. And avoidant people don't. And this is where the anxious people step in and be like, well, they need to get it together, and they need to become aware, and they need to, and it's like, yeah, that's easy for you to say when your wound is driving you into awareness. But you didn't choose to be the way you are any more than they chose to be the way they are. So it's easy for you to point the finger and say, well, they need to learn, and they need to grow, and they need to do this, and they need to do that. But again, you didn't choose to be the way you are any more than they chose to be the way they are. So who are you to point the finger and say what they should do when you're only acting in accordance with your wounds anyway? And so avoidant people often get stuck in isolation. They feel like they don't belong. They feel like they're ill-equipped for relationship. And they don't really know where to turn for help. Especially with men, and there are definitely avoidant women, but especially with men, whereas women have been encouraged to talk about their feelings since basically the day they were born. Women have been encouraged to go to therapy, to get into healing work. Men are often shamed and criticized for doing these things. That's changing. It's changing. It's getting better. But it's still relatively recent. And so avoidant men are in a particularly difficult position where they're not even educated on why they are the way they are. They don't really know they might not even know about attachment theory or know that they have an avoidant style. And they are often completely unconscious of their emotional reality and like, let alone be able to put words to it, let alone be able to communicate their experience to someone. They often don't go to therapy until they end up getting a divorce or end up experiencing some big life consequence that kind of forces it on them, because the culture has not encouraged men to do that. The culture has told men, be strong, don't be emotional, carry all the weight, don't cry about it, be a man. And a lot of women don't want to admit this, but women have reinforced that narrative just as much as men have. Where women don't find emotional men attractive. They find strong, stoic, tough, manly men to be attractive. And so when a man is emotionally available, when he is emotionally attuned, when he is able to talk about his feelings, he gets put in the friend zone. And no man wants to be that man. So it's a really complex situation. But what I really want to get at here is that attachment theory is it's at a point where it's not doing us any favors anymore. It doesn't help to say you're anxious. It doesn't help to say you're avoidant. It doesn't help to feel disorganized and like your trauma is so bad that you can't even be put into a category. And it doesn't help to carry these labels without any direction about what to do with them. Like, what good is it to be an anxious person or an avoidant person if you don't know what to do with that? And that's why I created this blueprint system that I want to introduce you to now. It's because I've been observing for years, and this has all been a part of, developing my work as well. But I've been observing for years just how misunderstood these patterns are. How the terms anxious and avoidant and disorganized don't really name what's happening with a person. And how the more we identify with these superficial labels and think that it somehow explains what's happening for us is only having people sink deeper into their patterns, having people sink deeper into their pain. And the more we look at other people and think we can name their pattern, oh, they're avoidant, oh, they're anxious, or they're this or they're that, it just creates more separation. Like, it's not helping us understand ourselves, and it's not helping us understand each other. It's having each of us isolate in our own worlds with a really shallow understanding of what's actually going on for people, and we get to feel smart. And we get to feel morally superior. So I've seen this problem for a long time, and it's really bothered me. It's really bothered me the way that people talk about attachment styles, the way that particularly anxious people harshly criticize avoidant people with no real awareness or understanding of what's going on for them, and the way that avoidant people are just always cast as the villain when they have trauma equal but different to what an anxious person is experiencing, and they're really trying to protect themselves from their own anxiety, not unlike what an anxious person is doing. So I wanted to create something that could resolve this, something that could give us a more comprehensive understanding of what is really underneath an anxious or avoidant pattern. Something that explains the way in which anxious people shift to avoidance and avoidant people shift to anxiousness. Something that not only is diagnostic and gives us a label and a name that we can identify with, but something that also gives us a clear path to healing. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is for, right? The attachment theory wasn't created so that we could name ourselves as anxious or name ourselves as avoidant and be that for the rest of our lives. It was created so that we could have an awareness about actually being secure in relationship, and that we could hopefully heal and become secure. And so what my system offers is not just a label and an understanding of you are this way and here's why you're this way, but also a direct path to healing based on that specific blueprint. So what I want to invite everybody to do right now is I want to invite you to take the quiz. And I just want to quickly walk you through what's going to happen when you do. So you'll take the quiz. It's a short 15-question quiz. It will take you through a handful of experiences and thoughts and relational situations, and you'll just identify how you typically feel or how you typically relate with those situations. This is going to help to identify your primary relational blueprint. Now, once you identify your primary relational blueprint, I'm going to send you a video about that specific blueprint. It's a short video, less than 10 minutes long. But what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to name one, the origin story. Where did this blueprint come from? How did you develop this blueprint? What have been the relational experiences that you've had throughout your life that have caused you to show up in relationship this way? Then we're going to outline specifically what this blueprint means for you and how it's distinct from all the other ones. So because you have this blueprint, how does that play out in your relationship? And we're going to name the exact feelings, thoughts, behaviors, emotions, and experiences that these blueprints tend to have. The last and most important thing is I am going to outline a specific path to healing based on that blueprint. So for every type, there is a unique path to healing that is exactly what that type needs. So if you have one of the types or another one of the types, I'm not going to name all the types right now, but you're just going to have to take the quiz and find out what yours is. But depending on which blueprint type you have, you are going to be able to get a clear, streamlined path to exactly how you work with that type to become more secure. And again, at the end of the day, that's what this is about, right? It's about feeling good about ourselves, feeling confident, feeling worthy, feeling lovable, not collapsing every time a relationship doesn't work out, right? But feeling secure in ourselves, feeling whole, feeling worthy, and being able to carry that within us even when a relationship goes our way and even when it doesn't. I want to quickly just tell you a few things about the system, but I don't want to say too much because I'd rather you just take the quiz and see for yourself, because if I tell you too much here, it's probably going to confuse you more than anything. But I'll just say a few things. So first of all, the link to take the quiz is going to be in the show notes right below wherever you're listening to this podcast. So as soon as you're ready, you can click that and go take the quiz. The way the system is set up, you can think of it as a quadrant system. So there are 4 blueprints, each in certain quadrants. And then you can think of like 2 cross axes, right? So there's a horizontal axis and a vertical axis. And on the horizontal axis, on one side you have anxious and on the other side you have avoidant. So these are going to be kind of classic attachment style experiences. Then on the vertical axis, on the top you have helpless, and on the bottom you have controlling. And now each one of these blueprints is going to fit into one of these 4 quadrants. So to make it really simple, your blueprint would either be avoidant and controlling, or avoidant and helpless, or anxious and controlling, and anxious and helpless. Right? So that's just kind of the starting point. Is each blueprint will identify with one of these 4 quadrants. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Everybody is going to have a primary and a secondary blueprint. Your primary blueprint is going to be the most common one. It's going to be your default. So if you tend to feel anxious in relationships, your default will probably fall on the anxious side of the spectrum. If you tend to feel avoidant in relationships, your default will probably fall on the avoidant side of the spectrum. But then the magic happens when you identify your secondary blueprint. And so your secondary blueprint is going to be where you go under stress. Do you vacillate between anxious and avoidant? Do you vacillate between helpless and controlling? What are the circumstances, situations, and conditions that cause you to vacillate between your primary and your secondary blueprint? These are all the nuances that attachment theory just doesn't address, right? You can identify as being anxious or avoidant, but that doesn't give you a lot of access to what's really happening. But when you really understand what your blueprint is and all the nuances and details with it, you're going to say, oh, I see it now. Yeah, I tend to have mostly anxious experiences, but I tend to vacillate between trying to control relationships and feeling helpless. Or you might say, I vacillate between being anxious and being avoidant, but the core thread that holds it all together is I always feel helpless or I always feel controlling. And this is where the magic is going to happen. Because when you really understand your blueprint, you're going to feel like things finally make sense, maybe for the first time in your life. And this is powerful. This is something that you don't just get by carrying a label of anxious or avoidant. But then again, I want to say this is the most important thing. Not getting a name or a blueprint or another type that you can put on your resume that this is who I am. But based on your unique style, based on the answers that you've given in the quiz, what is the path to healing that is outlined for you specifically? What is the path that is going to allow you to become more secure? This is the powerful part underneath it all. Because once you really have your clear path forward, it becomes very simple. You get a set of practices that you work with, and every relational experience becomes an opportunity to practice that. And every time you do, you move toward being secure. Because the truth is, I don't really want you to be anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, or to be any one of my blueprints. That's not the point. What I want for you is for you to feel secure. What I want for you is for you to feel whole and worthy and lovable. And I want you to be able to go out there and date and talk to people and mingle and have fun and get into a relationship and get out of a relationship or whatever happens. But no matter what happens, I want you to feel whole and lovable and secure within yourself. And so that's the point of this. This is not about getting another label. It's not even necessarily about understanding what you do in relationships, although that's a big part of it. But it's really about mapping out a clear path to being secure. And so this is how it's going to work. You're going to take the quiz. The quiz is going to identify your primary type right off the bat. Then what you can do is you can opt in for me to send you a personalized video based on your exact type that I'm going to break down this type for you. I'm going to tell you the origin story. I'm going to tell you exactly how this shows up in relationships. And I'm going to give you a really simple, clear path to becoming more secure. Then if you want to take it to the next step, for a small introductory fee, you can book a one-on-one blueprint audit with my team. This is where we're going to sit down with you one-on-one. We're going to take a full hour to go through your specific blueprint type and also identify your secondary blueprint type. We're going to name the unique conditions that cause you to move between one type and the other so you can really see the whole pattern laid out. Then together, we're going to map out a comprehensive path to becoming more whole and secure within yourself. And this is going to be powerful for you. So I want to invite everybody, if you made it this far in the episode, you must have some interest in this conversation. I'm really excited about this because I'm really excited to offer something that can expand on something that we're all familiar with, but something that isn't really helping us and make it actually helpful. Because the truth is, nobody is just avoidant. Nobody is just anxious. Nobody is just disorganized. Nobody is even just a narcissist. You know, we all have complex relational patterns that are very unique to us. It's not a one-size-all-fits kind of thing. And what I want to do is give you deeper insight into exactly how you are. Not just the blanket statement, but the detailed nuance of why you experience things the way you do in relationship. And rather than just leaving you there, I want to give you a way out. A way to freedom, a way to create the kind of secure, deep, passionate, fulfilling love that you want to have, or you wouldn't be listening to this podcast in the first place. So that's what the system is about. It's not about another label. It's not about another thing that you can tell yourself that you are and identify with and things that you can name other people. But it's about really understanding on a deep level why you experience love and romantic relationships the way that you do. And what you need to do to shift that experience into the one that you really want to have. So again, I'm going to leave the link to take your free quiz in the description right below wherever you're listening to this podcast. Go ahead, take that right now. You'll get your primary blueprint result within a few minutes. You'll get a free video breaking down that result. And then if you want to take it just one step further to really understand your pattern and how this shows up for you and why, you can book a one-on-one personalized audit with my team. We're going to sit down. We're going to help you name this clearly, understand it deeply, and map out the path to the secure, deep love that you want to have. So I'm really excited to introduce this and make this available for people. I think it's going to be a big evolution on everything you've learned about attachment styles and relational patterns in general. And it's going to be a big step in the right direction for anyone who wants to take that leap and learn a little bit more about yourself. So thank you for being here with me today. Lots of love and blessings, everybody. Go ahead, take your quiz now. I can't wait to see your results and to get to know you better on the other side. Love and blessings. I'll talk to you soon. See you next week. Take care. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.